In a small, peaceful village surrounded by lush green hills and thick forests, life moved at a slow and steady pace. People knew each other by name, and everyone had their own routines that rarely changed. Among these villagers was a young man who stood out from the rest. He was the new mathematics teacher at the local school, known for his strict ways and high expectations. The kids called him Sir with a mix of respect and fear because he always pushed them to think harder, solve faster, and never settle for less. This teacher wasn't just passionate about math. He lived for it. Numbers were like puzzles to him. Endless. Riddles waiting to be solved. But there was something else about him, too. Deep down, he believed that intelligence wasn't limited to classrooms or textbooks. He thought anyone, no matter their age or background, could have a sharp mind if given the chance. This belief, though well-intentioned, sometimes led him to act impulsively. One sunny afternoon, after finishing his classes for the day, the teacher decided to take a walk through the village market. It was bustling with activity, vendors shouting prices, children running around, and elders chatting under the shade of trees. As he strolled past the fountain in the center of the square, his eyes landed on an old woman sitting quietly on a wooden bench. She looked frail, her hands busy knitting what seemed to be a long scarf. Her silver hair was tied neatly in a bun, and she wore glasses that rested low on her nose. There was something calming about her presence, as if she carried years of wisdom within her. The villagers often spoke about her in hushed tones, calling her Grandma Mira. Some said she kept to herself, rarely speaking to anyone outside her close-knit family. Others whispered stories about how she used to live in the city before moving to the village decades ago. No one really knew much about her past, but they all agreed on one thing. She was kind, gentle, and full of grace. Something about Grandma Mira caught the teacher's attention. Maybe it was the way she sat so calmly amidst the chaos of the market, or maybe it was the thoughtful look in her piercing blue eyes. Whatever it was, it sparked an idea in his mind, an idea that would soon turn into an unforgettable moment. Without giving it much thought, the teacher approached her. His steps were confident, almost determined. When he reached her, he stopped and cleared his throat. The old woman looked up, surprised to see him standing there. Before she could say anything, he pulled out a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. On it was written a complicated equation, a mix of calculus and advanced algebra that even some university students might struggle with. "Here," he said, holding the paper out to her. His tone wasn't rude, but it wasn't exactly polite, either. It was more like a challenge, a test to prove whether his theory about intelligence being ageless held any truth. The old woman blinked, clearly taken aback. For a second, she simply stared at the paper, then at him. The teacher expected her to refuse, maybe laugh it off, or even scold him for disturbing her peace. Instead, she surprised him. Without hesitation, she took the paper, adjusted her glasses, and began reading it carefully. The crowd nearby noticed what was happening. A few people paused mid-conversation, while others leaned in to get a better view. Some chuckled nervously, thinking the teacher must be joking. After all, why would anyone ask an elderly woman to solve such a difficult problem? Others frowned, feeling uneasy about the whole situation. They thought it was disrespectful to bother someone her age with something so trivial, or so they assumed. But Grandma Mira didn't seem bothered at all. In fact, she appeared completely focused. With surprising speed, she reached into her bag, pulled out a pen, and started writing on the back of the paper. Lines filled with symbols, numbers, and calculations began to appear, flowing effortlessly from her hand. The teacher watched in silence, his initial confidence slowly giving way to curiosity. He couldn't believe what he was seeing. Every step she wrote was precise, logical, and elegant. Minutes passed, and when she finally finished, she handed the paper back to him. Her expression was calm, almost serene. "There," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of satisfaction. "That should do it." The teacher glanced at the paper, his heart skipping a beat. Not only had she solved the problem correctly, but her method was unlike anything he'd ever seen. It was simpler, cleaner, and far more efficient than the solutions he had taught his students. It was as if she had uncovered a hidden shortcut that made the entire equation look easy. "How did you?" he began, his voice trailing off. He wanted to ask so many questions, but words failed him. All he could do was stare at the paper, dumbfounded. She smiled faintly, her eyes twinkling with quiet amusement. "Mathematics is timeless, young man," she said gently. "Age has little to do with understanding." That single sentence hit him like a bolt of lightning. Standing there, holding the paper in his hands, he realized he had underestimated her, and perhaps himself as well. What started as a casual experiment had turned into something far greater, a glimpse into a world of brilliance he hadn't anticipated. The teacher stood frozen, staring at the paper in disbelief. His mind raced as he tried to process what had just happened. The equation he had scribbled down was not something anyone could solve without years of study and practice, or so he had thought. Yet here was this elderly woman, someone who lived a quiet life far removed from classrooms and textbooks, solving it with ease. It wasn't just her ability that amazed him. It was the elegance of her solution, the way she simplified the problem into steps that seemed almost intuitive. For a moment, silence hung between them. The chatter of the market faded into the background as the teacher's focus narrowed entirely on Grandma Mira. She sat calmly, her knitting needles clicking softly, as if nothing unusual had occurred. To her, it seemed like just another task, completed, but to him it felt like witnessing something extraordinary. Finally, clearing his throat, he managed to speak. How did you do that?" he asked, his voice tinged with both awe and confusion. "I mean, where did you learn all of this?" She paused her knitting and looked up at him, her piercing blue eyes locking onto his. There was no arrogance in her gaze, only warmth and understanding. "Learn?" she repeated softly, as if the word itself carried layers of meaning. "Young man, learning isn't confined to schools or books. Sometimes it comes from curiosity, from asking questions and seeking answers wherever you can find them." Her words struck a chord deep within him. He had always believed in the power of education, but hearing her say it made him realize how narrow his perspective had been. For years he had equated knowledge with formal training, assuming that brilliance could only thrive in structured environments. But here was proof that genius could exist anywhere, even in the most unexpected places. Curiosity burned inside him now, stronger than ever. He couldn't let this moment pass without digging deeper. "But surely," he pressed, leaning forward slightly, "you must have studied mathematics at some point. This level of skill doesn't come out of nowhere." Grandma Mira chuckled softly, the sound light and melodic. "Ah, yes, I did study once upon a time," she admitted, her fingers pausing their rhythmic movement. "A very long time ago, when I was younger, I worked alongside some brilliant minds. We explored ideas, solved problems, and pushed boundaries. But life has a way of changing course, doesn't it? One day I found myself here living quietly, content with my memories." The teacher listened intently, hanging on every word. Her casual mention of working with brilliant minds sparked a flurry of questions in his mind. Who were these people? What kind of work had she done? And why had she left it all behind? But before he could ask, she continued. "You see, young man," she said, her tone thoughtful, "knowledge is like a river. It flows endlessly, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand. Some choose to build dams containing it for themselves. Others let it flow freely, sharing it with whoever crosses their path. I've always preferred the latter." Her metaphor lingered in the air, simple yet profound. It reminded him of his own role as a teacher, not just to impart facts and formulas, but to inspire others to think critically and embrace the beauty of discovery. Yet, despite her poetic explanation, he still sensed there was more to her story. Something told him that the calm exterior she projected hid a wealth of experiences and wisdom waiting to be uncovered. Encouraged by her openness, he decided to probe further. "If you don't mind me asking," he began hesitantly, "why did you stop pursuing mathematics? With your talent, you could have achieved so much." At this, a shadow passed over her face, brief but noticeable. She lowered her knitting and gazed off into the distance as if recalling memories buried deep within her. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a hint of sadness, though it remained steady. "There are many reasons why paths diverge," she said softly. "Sometimes circumstances force us to make choices we wouldn't otherwise. Other times we simply grow weary of the chase. For me, it was a mix of both. Life took me in a different direction, and I chose to follow it. But that doesn't mean I stopped loving mathematics. It's always been a part of me, like an old friend who never leaves." Her honesty moved him. He could sense the weight of her words, the unspoken sacrifices and challenges she must have faced. Yet, despite everything, she hadn't lost her passion or her ability. If anything, her skills seemed sharper, honed by years of quiet reflection and practice. Unable to contain his admiration, he blurted out, "You're incredible, truly. I've never met anyone like you." To his surprise, she laughed, a warm, genuine laugh that lit up her face. "Oh, please," she said, waving a hand dismissively. "I'm just an old woman who happens to enjoy numbers. Don't make too much of it." But he couldn't help making a big deal of it. In his mind, she was more than just an old woman. She was a reminder that intelligence and creativity weren't bound by age, gender, or circumstance. She represented everything he hoped to instill in his students: curiosity, resilience, and a love for lifelong learning. As they sat there together, surrounded by the hum of the market, a bond began to form between them. Though they came from different worlds, they shared a common thread: a deep appreciation for the mysteries of mathematics and the joy of unraveling them. The teacher knew this was just the beginning. He wanted to learn more about her, not just as a mathematician, but as a person. And perhaps in doing so, he would discover new truths about himself as well. Before leaving, he thanked her sincerely, promising to visit again soon. As he walked away, glancing back one last time, he saw her resume her knitting, her serene smile unchanged. Little did either of them know, their chance encounter would ripple through the village, sparking change and inspiring countless others. But for now it was enough to marvel at the brilliance of an ordinary woman whose extraordinary mind had left him speechless. The next few days were unlike any the teacher had experienced before. His mind kept replaying the scene at the market, the crumpled paper, the elegant calculations, and Grandma Mira's quiet confidence. He couldn't shake the feeling that there was so much more to her story, layers upon layers of wisdom and experience hidden beneath her calm exterior. The curiosity that had driven him to approach her in the first place now consumed him entirely. It wasn't just about mathematics anymore. It was about understanding the person behind the brilliance. Every evening after school, he made his way to her modest cottage on the edge of the village. Nestled among tall trees and surrounded by flower beds bursting with color, the house exuded warmth and simplicity. Each time he arrived, she greeted him with a smile, inviting him inside without hesitation. Her home was cozy, filled with books stacked neatly on shelves, old photographs lining the walls, and the faint scent of lavender lingering in the air. It felt like stepping into another world, a sanctuary where time seemed to slow down. There, conversations began with math but quickly expanded into other areas. She spoke passionately about physics, explaining concepts like gravity and relativity in ways that even a child could grasp. "Imagine space as a giant trampoline," she said one day, using an apple from the table to demonstrate. "When you place something heavy on it like this apple, it creates a dip. That's how planets and stars influence each other." Her analogies were simple yet profound, leaving him marveling at her ability to make complex ideas accessible. But it wasn't just her intellect that fascinated him. It was her humility. Despite her obvious brilliance, she never boasted or sought recognition. Instead, she shared her knowledge freely, as if it were a gift meant to be passed on. "Understanding isn't meant to be hoarded," she told him once. "It grows when shared, like a tree spreading its branches." As they talked, pieces of her past began to emerge. She revealed that she had grown up in a bustling city, the daughter of a school teacher who instilled in her a love for learning from a young age. My father used to say that questions are the keys to unlocking doors, she recalled fondly. He encouraged me to ask as many as I wanted, no matter how silly they seemed. Her academic journey took her to prestigious institutions, where she worked alongside some of the brightest minds of her generation. She described late-night discussions over cups of tea, brainstorming sessions that stretched into dawn, and breakthroughs that left them breathless with excitement. We weren't just colleagues, she said, her eyes lighting up with nostalgia. We were explorers, venturing into uncharted territories together. Yet, not everything in her life had been smooth sailing. Tragedy struck when she lost someone dear to her, a loss so profound that it forced her to reevaluate her priorities. Grief changes you, she admitted softly, her voice tinged with sadness. It makes you question what truly matters. For me, it became clear that I needed peace, a place where I could heal and rebuild. And so, she left the city behind, moving to the quiet village where she had lived ever since. Though she no longer pursued mathematics professionally, she never stopped loving it. Numbers have a way of grounding you, she explained. They're constant, reliable. No matter what happens in life, 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. Hearing her story, the teacher couldn't help but feel a deep sense of respect, not just for her achievements, but for her resilience. Life had thrown challenges her way, yet she had faced them with grace and strength. She reminded him that true intelligence wasn't just about solving equations or mastering theories. It was about navigating the complexities of life itself. Their bond grew stronger with each visit. What started as a casual exchange of ideas blossomed into a genuine friendship. He found himself looking forward to their evenings together, eager to learn not only from her vast knowledge but also from her perspective on life. She, in turn, seemed to enjoy his company, often teasing him gently about his enthusiasm. "You remind me of myself at your age," she said one evening, chuckling, so full of energy and questions. One day, as they sat sipping tea on her porch, he mustered the courage to ask a question that had been weighing on his mind. "Why didn't anyone recognize your genius sooner? Surely people must have noticed what an incredible mind you have." She paused, considering his words carefully. "Recognition is fleeting," she replied finally. "It comes and goes like the seasons. But the joy of discovery, that stays with you forever. Besides," she added with a twinkle in her eye, "not everyone is lucky enough to stumble upon a curious young teacher in a market square." Her answer made him smile, but it also left him pondering. In a world obsessed with titles and accolades, Grandma Mira stood apart. She didn't seek fame or validation. She simply lived her truth, sharing her gifts quietly and humbly. And perhaps that was why her brilliance had gone unnoticed for so long. It wasn't loud or flashy. It was subtle, like a gentle breeze that brushes past unnoticed until you stop to feel it. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the village, he realized something important. Genius wasn't defined by awards or publications. It was about making an impact, however small. Whether through teaching, mentoring, or simply inspiring others, Grandma Mira had touched countless lives, including his own. Before leaving that evening, he thanked her again, not just for her insights, but for being who she was. As he walked back to his home under the starlit sky, he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He knew he would carry her lessons with him, not just in his classroom but in every interaction he had, and though he couldn't predict what the future held, one thing was certain. Grandma Mira's influence would continue to ripple outward, touching hearts and minds far beyond the little village they called home. Word of Grandma Mira's extraordinary abilities spread quickly through the village, like ripples in a pond after a stone is dropped. At first, people were skeptical. Some dismissed the stories as exaggerations, assuming the teacher was simply trying to make a good impression or perhaps even playing a prank. Others thought it was disrespectful to bother an elderly woman with such challenges, no matter how brilliant she might be. But curiosity eventually got the better of them. The villagers began whispering about her, wondering if there was any truth to the tales. It didn't take long for the murmurs to reach the ears of the local community leaders. Intrigued by what they heard, they approached the teacher, asking him to organize a public demonstration at the community hall. "If what you say is true," one of them said, "then this could be something special for our village, something we'll remember for years to come." The teacher hesitated at first. He knew Grandma Mira valued her privacy and wasn't someone who sought attention. Still, he couldn't deny the opportunity to share her brilliance with others, to let the world see what he had seen. After much thought, he decided to ask her directly. When he visited her cottage that evening, he found her tending to her garden, carefully watering rows of vibrant flowers. She looked up as he approached, wiping her hands on her apron. "You seem troubled," she observed, her sharp eyes catching the uncertainty on his face. He explained the villagers' request, emphasizing how eager everyone was to learn from her. "They want to understand math the way you explain it," he said earnestly. "Not as something intimidating, but as something beautiful and accessible." For a moment, she was silent, considering his words. Then, with a soft smile, she nodded. "Very well," she said, "but only if it's done on my terms. No grand speeches, no fuss. Just me, a chalkboard, and anyone willing to listen." The day of the demonstration arrived, and the community hall was packed. Villagers of all ages filled the room, children clutching notebooks, adults sitting attentively, and elders leaning on canes, their faces etched with curiosity. Even those who rarely ventured out of their homes had shown up, drawn by the buzz of excitement. The atmosphere was electric, a mix of anticipation and disbelief. When Grandma Mira walked in, supported gently by the teacher, the crowd erupted into applause. She waved shyly, her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. As she took her place at the front of the room, the chatter died down, replaced by an expectant hush. Standing before the chalkboard, she began speaking in her calm, soothing voice. She started with simple concepts, explaining addition and subtraction, using apples and oranges as examples. Her tone was warm and inviting, making even the youngest listeners lean forward in fascination. Slowly, she moved on to more complex topics, fractions, percentages, geometry, all while maintaining the same clarity and enthusiasm. Then came the part everyone had been waiting for, advanced mathematics. With the teacher's help, she wrote a challenging equation on the board, one that would have baffled most university students. Step by step, she broke it down, turning the abstract into the tangible. Her explanations were so clear, so logical, that even those who had never liked math found themselves nodding along, mesmerized by her ability to simplify the seemingly impossible. As she worked through the problem, gasps of amazement rippled through the audience. Children's eyes widened in wonder, while adults exchanged astonished glances. By the time she reached the final solution, the room erupted into cheers. People clapped, whistled, and even stood up to applaud, their respect and admiration evident. But Grandma Mira wasn't finished yet. She turned to the crowd, her expression serious now. "Mathematics isn't just about numbers," she said firmly. "It's about thinking critically, solving problems, and finding patterns in chaos. These skills aren't limited to classrooms. They're tools you can use every day in every aspect of your life." Her words resonated deeply with everyone present. For many, it was the first time they had ever thought of math or learning itself as something meaningful beyond textbooks and exams. Inspired by her message, several villagers approached her afterward, asking questions and seeking advice. Some promised to revisit old hobbies they had abandoned, while others vowed to encourage their children to pursue their passions fearlessly. The event sparked a wave of change throughout the village. People began organizing workshops and discussions, sharing skills and knowledge they had kept hidden for years. A retired carpenter started teaching woodworking classes, passing on techniques he had mastered over decades. A former seamstress offered sewing lessons, inspiring young women to create beautiful garments. Even the village baker hosted sessions on baking, revealing secrets behind his famous pies. Grandma Mira's influence extended far beyond mathematics. She reminded everyone that wisdom wasn't confined to age or profession. It could be found in anyone willing to share it. Her example inspired the villagers to look at each other differently, recognizing the untapped potential within their community. For the teacher, The demonstration reinforced everything he had come to admire about her. Watching her interact with the crowd, he saw not just a brilliant mathematician, but a natural leader, someone who brought people together through kindness and humility. It struck him that true greatness wasn't about standing above others. It was about lifting them up, helping them see their own potential. In the days that followed, the village buzzed with newfound energy. Conversations became livelier, collaborations more frequent, and ideas flowed freely. What had started as a single act of curiosity, a teacher handing a crumpled piece of paper to an elderly woman, had blossomed into a movement of discovery and growth. And at the heart of it all was Grandma Mira, quietly continuing her life as if nothing had changed. To her, the demonstration was simply another opportunity to share her love for learning. Yet to the villagers it was a turning point, a reminder that brilliance often hides in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to uncover it. The transformation in the teacher was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. But as weeks turned into months, those who knew him began to notice a shift, not just in how he taught, but in how he interacted with his students and the world around him. Gone was the rigid, no-nonsense man who once valued rules above all else. In his place stood someone softer, more patient, and deeply reflective. It wasn't that he had abandoned his high standards. Rather, he had come to understand that true learning didn't happen through fear or pressure. It happened when people felt inspired. Every evening after school, he made it a point to visit Grandma Mira. Their conversations became a ritual, a sacred part of his day. They would sit together under the shade of her porch, sipping tea and discussing everything from mathematical theories to life's bigger questions. Sometimes she shared stories from her past, about the colleagues she admired, the projects she worked on, and the challenges she faced. Other times they debated ideas, testing each other's perspectives and pushing boundaries. These exchanges weren't just intellectual exercises. They were moments of connection where two vastly different lives intertwined. One particular evening, as the sun dipped low on the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Grandma Mira offered him a piece of advice that would stay with him forever. "Teaching isn't about filling minds," she said gently, her voice carrying the weight of years of experience. "It's about lighting fires, the kind that burn long after you've left the room." Her words struck a chord deep within him. For so long, he had focused on results, perfect test scores, flawless solutions, and neatly written assignments. But now he realized that these things were secondary. What truly mattered was nurturing curiosity, helping his students find joy in discovery, and empowering them to think for themselves. He thought back to his own childhood, remembering teachers who had inspired him not because they demanded perfection, but because they believed in his potential. From that moment on, his classroom transformed. Lessons became less about lectures and more about exploration. Instead of dictating answers, he encouraged his students to ask questions. When they struggled, he guided them patiently, reminding them that mistakes were stepping stones, not failures. He introduced games and puzzles to make learning fun, turning abstract concepts into tangible experiences. Even the shyest students began raising their hands, eager to participate. But the changes didn't stop there. The teacher also started paying closer attention to the individuals in his class. He noticed the boy who doodled during lessons, realizing that his sketches often illustrated complex ideas better than words ever could. He saw the girl who always sat quietly in the corner, her notebook filled with detailed observations that revealed a sharp analytical mind. And then there was the troublemaker, the one everyone dismissed as lazy, who surprised him by solving a difficult problem using an unconventional method. Each student, he came to understand, had their own unique way of thinking, their own strengths waiting to be uncovered. Inspired by Grandma Mira's example, he made it his mission to help them unlock their full potential. He spent extra hours tutoring struggling students, offering encouragement instead of criticism. He celebrated small victories, knowing that confidence grew gradually like a seed breaking through soil. Meanwhile, Grandma Mira's influence continued to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond the village. Word of her story reached universities and research institutions, sparking interest among academics and educators alike. Articles were written, lectures were delivered, and podcasts featured interviews with the teacher, who eagerly shared what he had learned from her. Scholars marveled at her ability to simplify complex ideas, while teachers adopted her methods in their own classrooms. Yet despite the growing recognition, Grandma Mira remained unchanged. She still lived her quiet life, tending to her garden, knitting scarves, and welcoming visitors with open arms. Fame meant nothing to her. What mattered was the impact she had on those around her. Whenever someone thanked her for inspiring them, she simply smiled and said, "I'm just planting seeds. It's up to you to let them grow." As the seasons changed, the bond between the teacher and Grandma Mira grew stronger. Their friendship became a source of strength for both of them. For him, she was a mentor, a guide, and a constant reminder of the beauty of lifelong learning. For her, he was a bridge to the outside world, someone who helped her reconnect with passions she had set aside long ago. One crisp autumn afternoon, as leaves swirled in the wind, the teacher arrived at her cottage with a book tucked under his arm. It was a collection of essays on modern mathematics, topics she hadn't explored in decades. Her eyes lit up when she saw it, and she immediately invited him inside. Over steaming cups of tea, they dove into the pages, exchanging thoughts and debating theories late into the night. That evening, as he walked home under a canopy of stars, he felt a profound sense of gratitude. Not only had Grandma Mira changed the way he taught, but she had also reminded him of the importance of humility, empathy, and wonder. She had shown him that brilliance wasn't about being the smartest person in the room. It was about making others feel capable, valued, and inspired. And so their journey continued, a partnership built on mutual respect and a shared love for knowledge. Together they proved that learning had no limits, no boundaries. Whether young or old, experienced or inexperienced, anyone could contribute to the collective wisdom of humanity. All it took was a willingness to listen, to share, and to believe in the power of possibility. In the quiet corners of the village, whispers of change echoed louder than ever before. People talked about rediscovering forgotten talents, pursuing dreams they had shelved, and supporting one another in ways they never imagined. And at the center of it all stood Grandma Mira, a humble woman whose genius had sparked a revolution, not of fame or fortune, but of hope, growth, and unity. Time, as it always does, moved forward. Seasons changed, leaves fell, and winters gave way to springs. Life in the village continued its rhythm, but nothing was quite the same as before. The ripples created by Grandma Mira's quiet brilliance had grown into waves touching every corner of the community. People who once doubted themselves found courage. Those who felt invisible discovered their voices. And at the heart of it all was a shared understanding that wisdom wasn't something reserved for the privileged few. It belonged to anyone willing to seek it. For the teacher, each passing day brought new lessons, not just from Grandma Mira, but from the students he now saw in a completely different light. He remembered the boy who used to doodle during class, his notebook filled with intricate drawings. One afternoon, while explaining geometry, the teacher asked him to draw shapes instead of writing formulas. To everyone's surprise, the boy's sketches made the concept clearer than any textbook could. That small moment became a turning point, not just for the boy, who began participating more actively, but for the entire classroom. It reminded them all that intelligence came in many forms, and sometimes the most unconventional methods yielded the best results. The girl who sat quietly in the corner also blossomed under his guidance. Her detailed notes and keen observations inspired others to pay closer attention to the world around them. She started leading group discussions, her confidence growing with each passing week. Even the troublemaker, the one whose antics had frustrated teachers for years, found his stride when given the freedom to approach problems creatively. Together, they formed a classroom unlike any other, a space where curiosity thrived, mistakes were celebrated, and every voice mattered. Meanwhile, Grandma Mira's health began to decline. Age, though it had never slowed her mind, eventually caught up with her body. Visiting her became harder. Some days she was too weak to sit on the porch or hold lengthy conversations. Yet even in her frailty, her spirit remained unbroken. On good days, she would still share stories, her eyes sparkling with memories of the past. Other times she simply listened, content to watch the world go by from her window. The teacher visited her as often as he could, bringing books and updates from the village. "You should see the children," he told her one evening, his voice brimming with pride. "They're solving problems I never thought possible, and they're doing it because of you." She smiled faintly, her hands resting gently in her lap. "No," she corrected softly. "They're doing it because of themselves. I only showed them the path, they chose to walk it." Her humility struck him deeply. Here was a woman whose brilliance had transformed an entire village, yet she refused to take credit. Instead, she insisted that the real heroes were the ones who embraced learning, who dared to dream and grow. Her words reminded him of something she had said long ago. Knowledge is like a river. It flows endlessly, touching lives in ways we may never fully understand. One chilly morning, the village woke to the news that Grandma Mira had passed away peacefully in her sleep. Though her death left a void, it also sparked a collective outpouring of gratitude. Villagers gathered at the community hall, sharing stories of how she had touched their lives. Some spoke of her kindness, recalling moments when she had offered advice or encouragement. Others talked about her wisdom, marveling at how she had simplified the most complex ideas. Even those who hadn't known her personally felt her presence in the changes sweeping through the village, a renewed sense of purpose and connection. To honor her memory, the villagers decided to erect a statue in the market square, near the fountain where she had first solved the teacher's equation. Carved from smooth stone, it depicted her sitting calmly, a book in one hand and a pen in the other. At its base was an inscription, "To Mira, whose light illuminated paths unknown," reminding us all that wisdom knows no bounds. The unveiling ceremony drew crowds from neighboring towns. Children placed flowers at the statue's feet, while elders recounted tales of her generosity and insight. For many, it was a chance to reflect on the impact one person could have, not through grand gestures but through simple acts of sharing and caring. The teacher stood among the crowd, his heart heavy yet full. He thought about their evenings together, the countless lessons she had taught him, and the way she had reshaped his understanding of teaching and life itself. Though she was gone, her legacy lived on, in the classroom, in the village, and in the hearts of everyone she had inspired. Years later, the teacher became widely respected, not just locally but across the country. His innovative methods earned him awards and recognition, but he never forgot the woman who had changed everything for him. In interviews, he often spoke of her, crediting her as the catalyst for his journey. "She taught me that true education isn't about degrees or accolades," he would say. "It's about curiosity, empathy, and the belief that every person has something valuable to contribute." Grandma Mira's influence extended far beyond the village. Inspired by her story, educators began adopting her philosophy, emphasizing creativity and inclusivity in their classrooms. Textbooks featured anecdotes about her, highlighting how brilliance could emerge in the most unexpected places. Universities held lectures in her honor, celebrating unsung heroes of science and mathematics. But perhaps the greatest tribute came from the countless individuals who, inspired by her example, pursued their passions fearlessly, knowing that age, background, or circumstance didn't define their potential. Back in the village, life carried, unshaped forever by the woman who had chosen to live quietly, yet left an indelible mark. Her cottage, though empty, remained a symbol of hope, a reminder that genius wasn't defined by fame or titles, but by the ability to inspire wonder and ignite curiosity in others. On quiet evenings, the teacher would visit the statue, sitting on the same bench where their journey had begun. He would sit there for hours, watching the fountain splash water into the air, imagining her smile and hearing her voice in the rustling leaves. Sometimes he brought his students along, telling them stories about the extraordinary woman who had once called the village home. And so, Grandma Mira's story endured, not as a tale of personal achievement, but as a testament to the power of sharing knowledge, fostering curiosity, and believing in the limitless potential of the human mind. Her legacy wasn't confined to equations or theories. It lived in the smiles of children discovering joy in learning, in the confidence of adults rediscovering forgotten dreams, and in the quiet assurance that brilliance could be found in the most ordinary of places.